Representative Romero, thanks so much for being here on New Mexico in Focus.
My pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, you sponsored the bill and you're the chair of the so-called Truth Commission that's investigating what happened at Zorro Ranch, the former estate of Jeffrey Epstein, about 40 miles east of Albuquerque. Why do you think it's necessary to investigate what happened there, and why is the legislature the right place to do it?
So for years, we knew Jeffrey Epstein was in our community. This was something that was new to me in understanding how close so many of our community members were to this story and how directly impacted victims were that live in New Mexico or lived in New Mexico or were potentially trafficked here. As a legislator and as a person who's making laws, trying to keep people safe, when we heard about this, it was horrifying to me that folks had not been held accountable in our state. So as you start digging through how did this happen, what went on, the sort of Pandora's box opens up as to why this justice was never brought in New Mexico. So we're still going through that and navigating that understanding. But as a legislature, it's our duty to do the things that law enforcement or other entities have not done. We've had different commissions in the past to investigate certain things that have happened in government. This is one of our powers as a legislative body. And from the people of New Mexico, our nation and beyond, are asking for answers in this very massive story. And we are hoping to solve for that, to be able to provide those answers.
Sure. How will you go about finding those answers? What does that work look like?
So it's multifold. It feels like we're learning something new every day in this case. Just a few weeks ago, we learned that there was a tip to the FBI about potential bodies being buried at the ranch. Okay. I mean, this is all happening, it feels like, in real time, with us just trying to piece together the story of what happened at Zorro Ranch. Jeffrey Epstein was here for 26 years. And in that time, there were numerous allegations of, again, sex abuse, trafficking, and who knows what else. We know that our Department of Justice also settled for financial crimes with banks. So this story spans a lot of different areas. We're really focused on the victims, the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein who are still here today, that are looking to tell their stories, to get on the record with the Truth Commission, and with an open case that the Department of Justice has just opened criminally, to get them justice if we can. So with that open case, we're collaborating on folks that are coming forward. If there is somebody to be tried in court today, we're going to go after that first. But then, of course, our record is essentially that broad story of all of those different elements that we have yet to understand from an official government record.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you brought up the Attorney General's investigation. There are two investigations going on, and I think there's a little bit of confusion of how those work together, how they're separated. The legislature's inquiry is civil, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and the Attorney General's is criminal. Your commission can't charge people with crimes, but what kind of power do you have and in terms of investigative authority?
Right. So our powers are quite broad as to being able to piece together a story. When we look at the New Mexico Department of Justice, they have to do everything beyond a reasonable doubt as a criminal case. Anything that is saying there were allegations, the statutes of limitations have run, and we're piecing together stories that, were reported to police, perhaps never investigated, that comes into the purview of our Truth Commission. Okay. So we're able to have that more narrative arc, call upon folks by subpoena if needed, and have the full force of law behind us to make sure that folks who need to come in and talk to us about specific things, that we have the powers to bring them in.
Okay. Can you explain that subpoena power a little bit more? What happens if somebody throws the subpoena in the trash? How do you get them to show up?
So thankfully, in the course of this, we have both the Department of Justice and then our governor has also stood in support of our Truth Commission as well. We'll have to file a subpoena in the court register for where that person perhaps lives and where we can get a hold of them, and then have the full force of law to bring them in. If they deny that they don't want to be subpoenaed, they don't want to comply with the subpoena, well, then we can send in law enforcement to enforce that subpoena. And so that's what we understand with the checks and balances, that this is a very serious commission. We have many people that we are seeking to interview. We hope they will come voluntarily. But if they do not, that we have that full force of law behind us.
Okay. Is there a precedent for the legislature conducting an investigation of this scale, this much publicity, and with this much power, too?
Well, it feels like we're always in uncharted territories, whatever generation we're in. We do have precedents in the sense that the legislature has looked into very difficult situations back in the day in helping us inform this Truth Commission. Were allegations in the prison system back in the 70s about deaths that were happening there. And so, there is certainly a precedent on being able to take this role. I look to Congress from the various commissions that we've had since 9/11 or the January 6th Commission, things that we know that our legislative body and certainly our House can do and have an example for. But the scale is massive, no question, and for New Mexico, probably unprecedented. But it's something that's so important to ignore or avoid. This is a role that we've taken on and are very serious about as a commission and are grateful to do it, truly.
Okay. I want to get into the difference between your investigation and the Attorney General's a little bit more.
Sure.
What does the collaboration that you mentioned look like? Are you able to share information? Is the AG's office able to share information with you, vice versa?
Yeah, so again, these were sort of parallel paths as we had already had our legislation for the Truth Commission in the hopper during session when this investigation reopened. After we were able to create the Truth Commission, The investigation reopened. So these parallel paths are multifold. One is that we don't want to compromise any criminal investigation that's happening today. Sure. So that justice can be brought immediately. That means in the purview of the New Mexico Department of Justice, for anyone that's coming forward, they're sort of our first line of investigation to make sure that we don't compromise any of that. They're that filter, and then there's a feedback loop to us on any information that they already have or obtained through their investigation that they can't criminally charge. That comes back to us. And so we're certainly working together. We're working collaboratively. Anything that they do, we will get word of and understand that we're collaborating on that information, and they've had information from the past that they're able to go directly to the FBI, to the Federal Department of Justice, and request information as a law enforcement agency. Should that information be provided to them, that will also be provided to the Truth Commission.
Okay. Now, of course, the federal DOJ released millions of documents in the Epstein files. How will those influence your work? Are you combing through them? Do you have staff working on that? How is that playing into it?
It's going to be a both and in the sense of staff going through the files of interest. Personally, I've gone and done my own data digging on Santa Fe, on New Mexico, on the search results that are available. There's tens of thousands. Yeah. So it is a lot of legwork, and it makes no sense, right? When you just look at a bunch of data, unsynchronized, it makes no sense. So working with the Department of Justice and actually our congressional representatives, because of the Epstein Transparency Act, congressional representatives are the only people today that have unredacted document access. So we've even been collaborating with congressional representatives to get certain information that we find to be pertinent to even whether it be criminal or certainly for our Truth Commission to be able to do. We're doing our own digging. We're getting ready to hire a staff to help with those documents. But again, even in the biggest data release that we had most recently, we'd seen these documents about allegations, again, of bodies being buried at the ranch that had never been news to us. I think that's what triggered the criminal investigation to be reopened. And certainly going, wow, the timing is uncanny that we were able to get this Truth Commission up and running while this information is now just being released for the first time. And we still have 3 million documents, to our knowledge, that have not been released. released, including the investigation that was done here in New Mexico that had never been revealed to both the DOJ locally and anyone in New Mexico about what they had found. We still don't know that. And so we know those documents exist, but we just have not yet seen them.
Okay. Now mentioning the federal documents, we know former Governor Bill Richardson's name has appeared several times in those files. Will he or others connected to him be specific targets of your investigation?
Absolutely. If you were alleged to have committed a crime in New Mexico, you are very likely on our list of people of interest. We need to know what happened, and certainly for the victims, we are looking to them to provide that information. The criticality of our Truth Commission is so massive in making sure that everybody knows that no one is above the law, whether you were rich or powerful or in office or not, that those names will come out, and we will have persons of interest on that list that, of every echelon of power.
Okay. Are there any other names that you're looking into tied to New Mexico?
We will. We don't have anything to release publicly today, but we will. Okay. Yes.
In the case of Governor Richardson, obviously he's no longer alive. What does that look like in terms of accountability, your investigation? How does that change how you approach that?
Well, again, this is what is so different about the Truth Commission's ability to get things on the record. If those allegations were made and can be verified, those will go on our record. For Jeffrey Epstein, he's no longer here, neither is Bill Richardson. So these are very difficult cases. However, we have the ability to get the truth out there with what happened, where the pitfalls were, and certainly what laws that allowed for this to take place. As a legislature, we want to make sure that we look very closely at those laws that didn't allow for justice to be had, if that's the case.
Okay. What's the criteria for releasing information to the public? Is it any interaction that someone may have had with Epstein?
So this is where our bipartisan group of commissioners is really critical. We have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans serving on the commission. Nothing will be released publicly until we are in agreement that it should come forward. And of course, we're being really careful, especially about victims who do not want to be named, the protection of information for folks coming forward, that their, identities are protected if needed. So that's where we all have to be in agreement before those reports come back, and we will do it as a commission as well.
Okay. So protecting victims, making sure, what else might you not release to the public other than maybe something that would impede the Attorney General's investigation? Is there any, idea of not putting someone's name out there, maybe if they just had a minor interaction with them?
That's right. I think we're going to be really careful that we have a real case to be made around allegations, around coming forward. We know already the wake of what's happened in other countries, folks resigning, stepping down, being held accountable in other spaces across the country as well. This is a big deal to us for the folks that already have been named, but we wouldn't come forward with anything that was just, not something absolutely sure that we could report on.
Okay. So you do find something that you're absolutely sure that you can report on. What are the consequences for those people? Is it just purely a naming and shaming exercise? Are there more consequences that people could face?
Well, that's the second charge of what the Truth Commission is really looking at. One is to get the information on the record. But the other part is that if there was a crime that would have been charged if it was in real time, reported at that time, and law enforcement knew about it, we're looking to our laws as a state to say what needs to change in order to be bringing justice to the victims, and what could we be looking at criminally that should be changed in order to be able to provide that opportunity. So there is a chance that step 2 of that, once we do see the record clearly, that our laws may change in favor of those folks to bring them justice.
Okay. Now, since the commission has began its work, have you heard from victims or victims' families? What are those conversations like?
Yeah, we've already received, since the commission's idea was even in the news, we've had various accounts from victims coming forward, and so much information from the community, folks that were in and around Jeffrey Epstein and the operation there that have wanted to come forward. Again, in collaboration with the New Mexico Department of Justice, they're our first line of questioning to make sure that if there's a crime today, that they can take care of that. And then they'll come back to us to be on the record with the Truth Commission to be able to provide information surrounding what cannot be prosecuted.
Okay. Just a couple more for you. Back to public disclosure just for a second. I know there are 2 reports mandated from the commission. When will those come out, and what can folks expect to see in them?
So we expect an interim reporting to happen by July 31st. There's so much information, I can imagine we'll likely report before then, since there are so many different narratives to this case. I hopefully envision something more visual, like a January 6th or 9/11-like commission that we've seen, where there are a lot of people in real life, in real time today, that are on the record. I think it's important for folks to understand that these are people that are still existing and have been suffering through the lack of injustice, I think, from the many years, some decades. So to have a visual reporting of a lot of this, along with, the necessary documentation for anything to potentially be used in a court, should we find it. And so I think you'll see a tandem of both and an ability for us to really demonstrate what we found. Okay.
The commission is only on the books until the end of the year, as of now anyway. Is that enough time?
I hope so. There's a lot on our plate, no question. But we're going to be honest with the public about what we are finding and how much more time we may need. I hope to meet that deadline. I think there's plenty of information that has been both compiled and looked at and reviewed already that we can report on. But that's going to come with the time that we have, and we want to be really sure that we're all in agreement when we come forward.
Sure. What happens if on December 31st you decide you need more time?
We'll talk to the legislature about that. It's an election year as well for many of us. That's why our deadline is the 31st. Okay. We have to go back in, take an oath, get back into session in order for us to continue the work. So we're on those timelines as well. And again, anything can happen in this next election. I'm also up for re-election. So if that changes, we can't continue, or at least it wouldn't be me. The commission can continue. So all of that to say, we're going to try to meet this year deadline as best we can and run with it as we must.
Okay. Representative Romero, thank you so much.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.